that is really a way for a lot of these companies that are very invested in the cable ecosystem to keep that alive, to prop it up. So I think there are business reasons why they're all happening, and I don't necessarily see one as emerging as like the quote-unquote winner.
Hey gang, it's Monday, July 8th. Paul, Yuri, and listeners, welcome to the Behind the Numbers Daily and eMarketer podcast. I'm Marcus. Today I'm joined by two gents. Both of them cover advertising, media, and technology for us. One of them is based in New Jersey. He is our principal analyst called Yuri Wormser.
Hey Marcus, how are you?
Hey fella, very good. How are we doing?
I'm doing great.
Very nice. We're also joined by one of our vice presidents of content, covers the same stuff as I said. He lives just north of New York City. It's, of course, Paul Werner.
Great to be here.
Hey, chap. So, gents, today's fact: which animal sleeps the least and the most?
Most, I'm going with cats.
On a per animal basis, cats probably a good guess. I don't know where they rank, but I'll give you the least first. Discover magazine notes the African elephants sleep only 2 hours per day.
Wow.
I'm not a doctor, but I don't think that's enough.
It's not enough. Yeah.
Okay. I thought so. The most, the koala bear. They sleep between 20 to 22 hours per day, according to BBC Science Focus. Lazy.
Yeah. Where do sloths come in the rank?
They're second. No, they're second, and then the brown bat is third. Sloth's about 20 hours, pretty much neck and neck with the brown bat.
Koalas, they're still kind of grumpy creatures.
I know. It's like my sister would give them a run for their money. She's also miserable. That's right, Nicole. I said it. She has no idea I host a podcast, so I will tell her my feelings in person. Kidding. I love you, sis. Anyway, today's real topic: ad and media predictions for the rest of the year. In today's episode, first in the lead, we'll cover some predictions, no and other news. So how does this episode work? Well, Yuri and Paul will have 60 seconds to pitch two predictions, each that they expect to happen before the end of the year. Yuri goes first, then me and Paul and folks listening will decide if we are going to quote-unquote invest in his prediction. Invest meaning, do we believe in it? Then we move to the next contestant and repeat. As I said, both Yuri and Paul have two predictions for us. Let's do it. Yuri is up first. Yuri, 60 seconds on the clock. What's your first prediction?
First prediction is that Apple Intelligence, when it comes online, is going to shake up the app ecosystem.
So for folks who haven't read yet, Apple Intelligence, so it's Apple's AI offering, aims to help users navigate Apple devices more easily using generative AI to do things like summarize messages, instantly write replies to emails in your writing style, things like that. It basically taking everything your phone knows about you from your messages, your calendar, your maps, and then it kind of surfaces the right information at the right moment, maybe even taking action on your behalf if you let it. It also, Siri is going to be helped by ChatGPT 4.0. If it can't answer the question, it will turn to that technology to try and help. And Apple Intelligence arrives later this year.
This is going to have the effect of people going into their phones and asking specific questions and getting answers without having to go into specific apps. And the effect that's going to have is it's going to make winners in app categories more so than today. People will ask, okay, order me an Uber or tell me the TripAdvisor rating on something. And that will create winners and losers. And you're going to start seeing a little bit of that already at the end of 2024.
Mm-hmm. So do you have a sense of who they're going to be?
I think the category leaders that are leading right now are going to, have the brand identity that, the exploration is going to be reduced and those leaders will get strengthened as even stronger leaders.
Mm-hmm. Surprised we haven't seen more pushback from the developer community, app developers?
I don't know if they have much choice. I mean, Apple's giving them tools as well to plug into Apple Intelligence. So I think you're going to see a lot of those developers take advantage of that and try to be some of the winners out there and to try to supercharge their apps. But yeah, I think it's going to be pretty disruptive.
Because this is going to need to pull from existing apps, right? It's not even going to help with like app discovery. It's not going to say, oh, you want to try and do this. You don't have this app. if you did, you'd be able to. So it's not like the counter argument would be, well, it's going to make you engage with your phone more. So maybe that you'll end up spending more time with your device, which means you'll spend more time with the apps, even though it will pull some information up to the surface. Is that a fair argument, or is this kind of a lose-lose for app developers?
Well, I don't think it's lose, but I think it does make app discovery more difficult. So if you have a new app, I think it'll be harder to break through unless the category is relatively new and it doesn't plug into Apple Intelligence very easily.
Yeah.
But I think for existing categories, sort of already fairly mature categories, it will make discovery harder.
Yeah. I'm in. I do think this is going to upend the app ecosystem. The predictions were supposed to be by the end of this year. I don't know if it happens that soon. Now, Apple Intelligence is going to be rolled out in the new set of devices in the new iOS 18, I believe, Yuri, comes out in September.
That's right. Yep.
So it could. We saw how big an effect previous updates to its iOS have had on certain players. So it could happen very quickly. But I'm going to invest. I'll go 0.5 point. Susie made up the 0.5 point investment, which kind of ruined things.
If we're going fractional, I'll go 0.25 point.
Oh my goodness. Why'd you take us there?
And I do want to give a hat that I've seen a few others make a similar prediction, including Eric Seffert. So I just want to acknowledge that I'm not alone in thinking this, but we'll see if we're right.
We'll cut that out and just make sure that everyone knows it's just you. Paul, Paul doesn't get to do, we're both giving you an investment point. So you get a full investment point out.
I said
one
a quarter.
Out of two.
I said a quarter.
You're not allowed. Oh, sorry. Yeah, you're not allowed to do that. That's against the rules. So half was too much when Susie did it. So Paul, I'm going to push you for a 0.5 point. I'll go 0.5 point, full point for Yuri out of a potential 2. Paul, your first prediction.
My first prediction is that we are going to see a lot more bundling among not just streaming services, but network groups. And the bundling, I see bundling is coming in 3 flavors. One is a company like Disney bundling, Strawberry, bundling some of its services. So, what has been called the Disney bundle, Marcus, you can call it the Strawberry bundle, whatever you want to call it. It's basically, bringing your own services into a plan that allows for some kind of savings or some user experience in a consolidated app.
The in-house bundle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Second one is one that we're seeing more and more of, and that is competing streaming services offering, basically banding together. And the third one is doing this across both traditional and digital media and among rivals as well. So this is happening more and more. So we saw this from Netflix, Apple TV Plus, and Peacock, the Stream Saver bundle, and their other rivals are also getting together. Then there's the Venue Sports bundle, which, for a long time we didn't have a name. Now we have a name for it. So that is Disney, Warner Bros. Discovery, and Fox. One of the things that's driving this is this idea that 200 is the new 100. And by that, I mean that the conventional wisdom was that a streaming service to work as a standalone business needed at least 100 million subscribers. And now in this great article in the New York Times that interviewed some industry elders like Brian Roberts of Comcast, John Malone, Barry Diller. So their idea now is that you need about 200 million subscribers. So the only way to get that kind of scale is to band together, even if it means
to become a mainstay in streaming.
Yeah. So that, that means some strange bedfellows. And so we're going to see that. But we're also seeing Fubo TV, the streaming service, just announced an alliance with NBC Universal around the Olympics coverage. I think we're seeing more cable providers basically get in bed with streaming services because it really helps both businesses. So in other words, these alliances are going across media types and across competitive battle lines. So I think we're going to see more and more of that.
That's Stream Savers from Xfinity. So it's about $35 a month. Netflix, Apple TV Plus, and Peacock. Verizon was offering Netflix and Max without ads, a bundle there. You mentioned Venue Sports, there's a bundle there. My question would be, Paul, which flavor of bundle do you see growing the most, let's say in the next 6 to 9 months?
I don't really see one taking precedence over another. I think there's a reason why they're all happening. I mean, the sports one is driven by just so much of the interest around sports, but also the fact that as a sports fan, it's very hard to get access to anything without subscribing to multiple services. Mm-hmm. And I think when it comes to entertainment content, it's a matter of scale. And when it comes to going across traditional media, that is really a way for a lot of these companies that are very invested in the cable ecosystem to keep that alive, to prop it up.
Yeah.
So I think there are business reasons why they're all happening, and I don't necessarily see one as emerging as like the quote unquote winner.
Right. But in terms of like in-house versus competitor versus cross channel.
I think the in-house ones are always going to be there. That's just logical.
Safe bet.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would have to say the streaming services getting together. That's the most intriguing one to me because that's something we haven't seen until now, competitors really just recognizing that they need each other.
Yeah.
I think some of these traditional media and digital media, like, Comcast has offered Netflix to some of its customers for many years now.
Well, you mentioned 200 being the new 100. The other part of this is if you look at Nielsen's gauge in terms of where people spend their time when they're watching TV. If you take these services individually, outside of YouTube, we're not talking about, but Netflix, which has 8% of the share of time people spend watching TV. Prime Video is about half that with 3% and Hulu as well. But then you're getting down to the 1 or 2% really quickly with Disney Plus, Tubi, Peacock, Max, etc. And so by bundling these, the Netflix, Peacock, Apple TV Plus bundle, the Stream Saver one, that's 9%. If you add those services together, that's 9% of the time people spend watching TV. Another bundle from Hulu, Disney Plus, and Max, which we've not mentioned yet, that would be about 7% of all the time people spend watching television. So when you add these things up, they are starting to get to a very large portion of the time people spend watching TV, which again, of course, is going to make them even stickier. Yuri, what do you think of this prediction?
I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me. My big question for Paul is, do you think consumers will react to the bundling as the streaming services expect them to? That is, they've hit a bit of subscription fatigue. This is, I think, an effort to overcome that. Do you see the business argument panning out for these companies?
I think there are two narratives here as far as the consumer goes. One is the narrative that the streaming services are offering more choice and consolidating some of the experience, which right now is extremely fragmented, especially around sports. The other argument is that this is just back to the cable situation that everybody, hated. People specifically are subscribing to streaming services because they don't want to pay a big monthly fee for something they're not watching. So I think this gets people back to that mindset. So how it ultimately plays out is going to have a lot to do with price points, with marketing, with making intelligent choices of what content to offer by these streaming services.
Yeah, the price point is going to be important because the inflationary pressures are forcing folks to cut back on streaming services. Inflation has been about 3 to 4% for the past year, down from the heights of like 9% in the summer of 2022, but higher than the previous 2 decades where America enjoyed about 2% inflation. So it's still a concern for folks. And there was some research I found from KPMG asking folks, American adults, what they're going to do with their streaming services because of budget constraints. And number one was cancel at least one streaming service due to reduced monthly spend. More so than canceling one streaming service to reduce their monthly spend. That's versus doing things like canceling because the price promo ran out, or downsizing, basically going for a lower priced tier with ads as a way to also save money. All right, Yuri, are you in or out?
I'm in. I think it's a pretty solid prediction.
I'm in too. So that's 2 investment points total. Yuri, back to you for your second prediction.
I'm going to a variant of an evergreen prediction that brand dollars are going to flood into gaming. So that's something I've predicted for a while, and it has happened incrementally over the last few years. But I think specifically my prediction is that Roblox's ad platform, which has been pretty successful so far, is going to usher in a big effort by a lot of game developers to create their own game platforms, specifically geared towards brand advertisers. That will entail more standardized ad formats, easier tools, better tracking. You've already seen that from Ubisoft, some stuff from Epic. I think this is going to be a fairly common move by most big game developers.
Mm-hmm. How likely is this, though, given that Roblox, they have 88 million folks who are on Roblox every day. That's pretty significant scale for a game. I mean, Paul was just talking about the 200 being the new 100. Do you think game developers are going to have that kind of scale before they're able to attract those ad dollars, those brand dollars in particular?
Well, gaming has huge scale. Scale has never really been the problem. It's been more, the formats, the fact that gamers, while they're playing, don't like interruptions. So there's been a combination of new ad formats like immersive ads, intrinsic ads, where they're in the background or sort of built into the gameplay. And now you're having some ad formats that have clear trade-offs and sort of play into Roblox is a perfect example of where the world is kind of enhanced with these background portals into ads, or into brands. So I think the scale is there. It's just a matter that the formats, the measurement hasn't been. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what this will introduce.
Paul?
Yeah, I'm fully in with this one. No fractional points here. I think
finally.
There's a lot to be said for how important gaming has been and will continue to be to marketers, and I think that's just going to grow. But I think so many entertainment companies that are not gaming focused are trying to be, and for good reason. This is a way to reach an audience that is hard to reach through other media. And, back to the point about streaming being so fragmented, I think when you can tap into that massive interest around so many games, and I think Roblox has done that very well, you can really unlock a lot of opportunities. So yeah, I would definitely invest in this one.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned growing space. I went and looked at some of our forecasting numbers. In-game advertising, a $9 billion space this year, growing to $12 billion in a few years' time. That doesn't sound like a lot in the grand scheme of advertising, but that's good enough for 2.3% of all ad spending in the whole US. That doesn't sound like a lot at all, but it's more than print. It's the same amount that advertisers spend on out-of-home ads, and it's a shade behind the amount of ad dollars being spent on radio.
That's true. And the other thing is that most of those dollars are going for game-to-game ads, so ads for other games. And I think what this will do is bring in more brand dollars.
Great point. Yeah, great point. I'm in. I thought this was going to be more controversial, but we're just in on all of them because they're spectacular, is what they are. Paul, your final prediction. What you got for us?
My final prediction is a little bit more straightforward than my previous one, and that is simply that Apple TV is going to launch a bona fide ad tier as part of Apple TV Plus. They've been really the only holdout among major services. So I think it's inevitable that Apple TV do something similar, especially as they become more similar to some of their competitors in the sense of like having quite a lot of sports content and a lot of entertainment content. And, they're trying to play in the big leagues.
Why have they been holding out? Why are they one of the last major streaming services to get into the ad game?
Well, I mean, to borrow from their very old slogan, they always like to think different or think they think different. They've been famously a very consumer-centric and privacy-centric company, at least in terms of how they position themselves. So advertising is never, like the first thing that they want to promote, unlike companies like Google or Meta and even Amazon now, which, makes tens of billions of dollars just from advertising a year. I think Apple has always gone a little bit more reluctantly into that realm, which is similar to what Netflix did for a very long time before they basically realized that they didn't have much of a choice. And I think Apple is going to confront that same kind of like tipping point. And some of it comes back down to this, 200 is the new 100, where if you don't have the scale, then you can plug in some of the revenue gaps through advertising. And even if you do have the scale, that argues for having a wider range of choices than just a subscription for an ad-free product.
Yeah. Yuri, what do you think?
I mean, since there were rumors of Apple building a DSP already a few years ago, I've been kind of expecting this, so I want to invest. My hesitation is around just their antitrust dangers, just the fact that does building an ad product take away or weaken their antitrust position? I mean, in media and Apple TV, I think the argument is pretty weak for that, but I'm just curious if that contributes to the delay and whether that might push it even further down the line.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they already have an ad product. I think what they haven't done is offer it as a consumer-facing choice. But, they're already selling ads against a lot of this content. I mean, especially on sports, which everybody sells ads against sports. So, I think, the rumors of the DSP, you're right, have been swirling for quite a long time now. But yeah, I think regulatory scrutiny is Apple's always looking over their shoulders for, what regulators are saying and thinking and what actions they might take. So, we don't know what the timeline is going to be or whether that scrutiny or the fear of scrutiny would slow down this kind of operation or, launching this kind of business. But I think it's in the cards, just as it has been for some of their competitors who are also under some amount of scrutiny themselves.
Yeah, I think it happens. I'm just trying to figure out if I think it happens within the next 6 months. So I'm going to go 0.5 point. Yuri?
Yeah, that's about where I feel. I think it's almost definite they're going to do it. I just don't know if it'll be in the next 6 months.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Maybe I'm glad that Susie invented the 0.5 point. Helps me be non-committal. All right, very good. That's all the predictions we've got for you today. We basically said we're going to invest in everything. So that must have meant there are good predictions or we're pushovers, one of the two. Anyway, thank you so much to my guests. Thank you to Yuri.
Always great to be here.
Yes, sir. Thank you to Paul.
Hey, great to be here as well.
Thanks to Victoria, who edits the show, Stuart, who runs the team, and Sophie, who does our social media. Thanks to everyone for listening in. We hope to see you tomorrow for some more predictions on the Behind the Numbers Daily and eMarketer podcast.